Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Shruti. How are you?
Hi, John. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's good to see you again.
Good to see you too after a long time.
Yeah, it's been a little while.
Yeah.
Um, all right, so today we have the great German mystic Rudolf Steiner,
Yes, we have Rudolf Steiner. Yeah.
and
Love
he's
him.
and he's here.
He is here. Yes, he's here. Very, very, very much here because he feels different. He doesn't feel like a spirit entity to me.
Uh-huh.
He feels very 3D. He's
Wow.
so he feels very real, almost as if he's just sitting in front of me. His energy is very solid,
Uh-huh.
is how I can put it. It's almost like for him, um, there's no difference between the this world and the spirit world. It's almost the same thing. So he's communicating as if he would communicate if he were in the material world.
Uh-huh.
So he's taken a seat, sitting very comfortably with his leg folded, and he's leaning on my right, and he's ready to talk. And he says hello to you.
Yes. Hello. Should we call him Herr Steiner? Is that appropriate?
Uh, was he a teacher or sort of a
Yeah.
professor?
Uh-huh.
He would like to call. He would like a professor, sort of a teacher. He likes to see himself as a teacher.
Okay. So we'll stick with Herr Steiner then, the formal
All right.
address.
Yeah.
Okay then. So let's move into the questions. The first question I have is for you, Herr Steiner, is regarding your. You put forth this model of the architecture of the subtle body, where you talked about how the human being is made up out of these four kind of uh, interlayered subtle bodies, where we share with the mineral world, the physical body, and then we have an etheric body that organizes the physical body that we share with plants. We have that in common with plants. But then we also have an astral body, which is the sort of seat of passions and desires, and that we share with animals. But then we also have something that those three kingdoms do not have, which is the ego, which reincarnates, you said, from lifetime to lifetime. Does this model turn out to be true? When you got to the other side, was it verified for you as the correct model?
So, the thing that the plants and animals do not have ego. Are you asking if that was verified?
If
Or,
yeah, if the
or
human, if his model of those four subtle bodies that interact in the human being is correct. Well, was it correct when you got over onto the other side? I mean, once
yes.
you get to the other side, you can verify these things, right?
Yeah, he says yes. It does give us a higher perspective of things and a greater knowledge. And he believes that the description of four bodies was very close to the reality that he has seen now.
hmm Okay, so it was correct, more or less, pretty
Yeah.
much. Okay. Um,
Absolutely.
in your model of pedagogy, your educational model for teaching children, you developed a model based on the fact that for you, the child every 7 years develops a different aspect of the subtle body. At the age of 7, the etheric body is freed up, and this coincides with the change of the teeth at about that time. And so you said that children should not be taught to learn how to read until they're 7 years old, because the memory doesn't get really freed up until then, when the etheric body then becomes available. And then 7 years after that, you get age 14, and you've got the astral body coming in with sexual desires and the passions and so forth. And then every 7 years, there's a different change in the human subtle body. And then this became the basis for your model of education for your Waldorf schools. What I'm wondering, though, is how similar this model is to the fact that in astrology, the planet Saturn does these squares every 7 years. Every 7 years, Saturn is doing something to your life. What I'm wondering is, you didn't seem to like Western astrology very much, and I'm wondering if you see astrology as something that's real. Is it valid? Does it work, or not? Was there a reason why you didn't like Western astrology?
Okay, his words. He's saying, I am ready to conform to it and agree that it has some what is it called? Some base to it. So he agrees that has some base, the astrology. And I can see it better now, he's saying. But he's also very happy with his explanation of the changes in 7 years. So he says that he still sees that explanation to be true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if astrology does work, then can you tell us how it works? How is it that it works?
How does astrology work?
I mean, because obviously it's not a causal thing like gravity, where we can say that gravity falls off with inversely to the square of the proportion of the difference as the planet moves away. So there's one force acting on another force. But astrology has something more to do with timing mechanisms that link the individual to the cosmos. And I'm just curious how it works. Could you tell us?
Yeah, he is talking about the spiritual body. What did he call the spiritual body?
He had several terms for it. The subtle body, I suppose.
Yeah. So he's saying the spiritual body that we all share with everything around us, with the cosmos, is all connected. The spiritual body is the same that's underlying everything that we see around us in the universe. In this universe and in all the other universes, we all share the connection with each other. And none of the planets, the trees, even to the tiniest rocks and insects, none of these things, even from the biggest bodies in the universe, like the planets and the suns and the stars, and to the minutest micro insects, none of them are separate. They all share and have the same bond and the same body in the foundation, and that is why we affect each other in some way. So you can imagine that these huge planets, which have huge masses, and all these big bodies that are there in the universe, they have much more greater effect on the little bodies like us and the little planets and little things. So by studying the big bodies like the planets, which are exactly next to us, close to us, which are more closer to us, we can predict a lot of things. We can see the patterns that are repeated, and things become predictable if we are able to understand how the big bodies around us affect us in some way. So these things play a role in our lives, starting from when we take birth to when we die. And when you study all of these big bodies around us together, you can sort of predict the outcomes, things that might happen. Mm-hmm. It's not like this is exactly what is going to happen. It's like there is a possibility of this happening more than the other things happening. So you sort of can have an idea of what's going to happen, and you can sort of use it because these are huge bodies which are very closer to us, and they have a lot of effect on us, and we all share the same base body.
And does this include the planet Pluto? I mean, you died in 1925, and Pluto wasn't discovered, I think, until 1932. So it was a few years after your death. And now Pluto's been downgraded to the status of a dwarf planet. But in astrological birth charts, it seems to be the planet that everyone dreads the most. The Pluto transits are long and slow and very often agonizing. Is that true? I mean, is Pluto, it seems like it has effects that are out of all proportion to its size. So why is Pluto such a troublesome planet?
He's first talking about Pluto was not discovered by the contemporary science, but it was discovered by the older civilizations much before that, and people had predicted this planet long before. Other civilizations and other people had predicted this planet. Why is it dreaded?
But I mean, you can't see it without a telescope. So how were they aware that it was there?
The other civilizations which already, are you talking about how
Yeah.
the other civilizations were aware of them?
Right. So were they aware of it through a clairvoyant means, or?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Through clairvoyant and through aliens.
Okay. Uh-huh.
Aliens or interactions with other beings, you can say.
Right.
But are we looking for the answer about why is Pluto so dreaded?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm getting the image of a cold, very cold planet. I suppose, is Pluto really, really cold?
I think so. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So, I'm getting an image that planet holds a lot of weight. You know, it sort of bends the space a lot more for some reason. Even if it's a dwarf small planet, it has a lot of effect energetically on us, and just everything around it. So because of that very heavy energetic denseness, it's when it has an effect on any individual chart, let's say, or any individual's life in some form, it can bring in unwanted circumstances, and that's why it is dreaded.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Are there any other planets beyond Pluto that we haven't discovered yet? Is there going to be another one, like a 10th planet?
Isn't Pluto the 10th one? No?
I don't think so. I think it's the 9th. I don't know. But gravitationally, scientists are saying that the gravity is not all accounted for. There should be something else out there to account for the...
Anything else after Pluto? He's asking me to relax. This is a big thing, So he's asking me. He's saying, "It's okay, Shruti, relax. Just relax. You'll get the answer. I'm letting you."
No, I have full confidence in you, Herr Steiner, that we'll get the answer. I'm not worried.
He's asking me to relax because I'm worried. Anyway, okay, I'm just going to listen to him. He comes back again and again to the same thing. I'm reconfirming it from him again and again. So he's saying that there wouldn't be a planet.
There's not another one?
No.
We've got them all for this solar system?
Yeah, He's saying actually he's showing me a like an asteroid or something, which will be even littler than Pluto, which might be there. So not asteroid, like a comet or something, which is after Pluto, and after that he's showing me another galaxy, like ours, like a Milky Way. So he's saying that there isn't a proper planet after that.
Okay.
There might be other little bodies, but not a planet.
There's some strange things about Uranus. Uranus is apparently it's a planet that seems to have been knocked over onto its side because it's not rotating with a north-south axis. It's more rotating around an east-west axis. So did something knock Uranus over? And if so, that's a huge planet. So what could have knocked it over? Can you tell us?
Sorry, I'm smiling because Eric is here as well. He's popped in.
Eric, hello, Eric.
He's saying hello to you. And of course, you can imagine
how's the afterlife treating you?
He's saying, "I'm being treated very well, dude, very well."
Awesome.
Yeah, just doing a lot of things. All right, so about Uranus. No, Herr Steiner is saying that it's over the course of time that has happened.
Oh, I see. All right.
Knocked it over. He's showing that it was when the planet's solar system was formed, already going towards that direction that it was going to take this form. So it happened over time.
Okay, so it was a gradual. Okay, I see. Can you tell us though, the planet Venus actually spins backwards on its axis, a very slow rotation. Do we know why? Because Immanuel Velikovsky was this fellow who had this idea that Venus actually began as a comet that split off from Jupiter and got captured into the orbit of the sun, where it's at now, but that it was originally an asteroid, and that would also account for why it's so hot. It's 900 degrees on the surface. But why is it spinning slowly backwards? It has a very slow rotation. What caused it to spin backwards?
He is actually showing me the solar system with the space, how the planets move around. So he's saying that the way the two planets, so Venus is the second planet, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, after Mercury.
So it's Earth and Mars on the sides. So he's saying that the way Earth and Mars, is it Mars or Mercury? Mercury.
It goes Sun, Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars.
Right. So Mercury and Earth, the way they have their orbits, he's saying, and the way these two orbits are formed, it creates a space for Venus to go in the opposite direction. The space is bent in such a way that it makes Venus go in the opposite direction.
Oh, I see. Oh, that's interesting. That's surprising. I didn't. So Velikovsky was wrong. In other words, it was not a separate asteroid or comet.
Okay, I didn't. Yeah, let me just. I'm getting a no. Yeah, so he was probably wrong.
Okay,
It's just the way the space is bent
I
by the
see.
two other planets. Um,
What about Mars? Did Mars ever have life on it?
did Mars ever have life? Um, okay, just a bit of clarification here. Uh, if life is looked at as a living, moving form, then there's a different answer. And if there's a life looked at like the stones, the rocks also have life,
No,
unconscious,
I mean specifically um,
like live.
biological matter that you would have called, anything that's biological, you said had an etheric uh, body to it. So was
Okay.
there anything on Mars like that?
Ever or now?
Yeah, ever. Right.
Ever. Um, it does not have an intelligent life form as such, a biological intelligent life form. It does have a non-biological spiritual life form.
Okay. Right. So this gets into so just to clarify then, Mars never had living things on it ever?
Not the way we would imagine the living things to be, no.
No. Okay. But it did have an ocean, right?
It was not water.
It was not. Ah.
It was another form of liquid.
Oh, another form of liquid. So all the evidence that we find for there having been water with the canals and rivers and so forth, that it wasn't water, it was another form of liquid? Hmm.
That's what I'm being shown.
Okay. Um, yeah, so this gets into your idea, Herr Steiner, that the planets are inhabited by spiritual beings, is what you always used to say. So this is true then? There are different spiritual beings assigned to each of the planets?
Different spiritual beings decide to um, claim or call these planets as home. Yes,
Ah, okay. So you were right about that. You
absolutely.
did say, I mean, you came up with this very elaborate creation mythology where you talked about how the universe unfolded through four distinct stages, and you named them after the planets: the Saturn stage, the Sun stage, the Moon stage, and then the Earth. And different things happen in each one of these stages. But you say that the Sun is inhabited by spiritual powers that you called actually powers from the angelic hierarchy of the powers, and that they withdrew from the Earth while the Moon was still with the Earth and became a separate entity. Did that in fact happen? Did the Earth somehow,
Mm-hmm.
uh, in the when the Moon was still with it, was there a separation there between the Sun and the Earth, or is that a totally? I mean, that doesn't fit with the science, with what we know about the science, which simply
Uh,
begins with you've got the sun and then little tiny bits and pieces of planets accreting together gravitationally until they form balls.
mm.
Um, was that kind of
So,
what you were getting at anyway?
um, so according to Steiner, did it all start with the Earth, and then it
No, it started with what he calls Saturn, where
Saturn?
there was
Oh,
this gigantic planetary entity that was as wide as the orbit of the planet Saturn is today. And then it was a
mm,
completely different phase, spiritually speaking. It was a totally different phase from these later phases. I'm just
mm,
wondering if he found, because these phases are rather bizarre. The way that he presents them in his creation myth, it's a little strange. And it puts a lot of people off of reading Steiner. When I try to explain Steiner to them, a lot of people say, well, yeah, but the Earth was never part of the sun. That doesn't make any sense. So I'm wondering what to make of his creation myth, where he drew everything out into these 4 distinct stages, with 3 more stages to come in the future.
Oh, so wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does it
Ask him what that is about.
correspond with truth in any way? Those 4 stages?
So the first stage was Saturn, and then
Yes.
it was Sun,
Sun, right? Moon,
and then
Earth, and then during each one of these stages, the architecture of the 4 subtle bodies gets developed. The physical body develops during the Saturn phase. The astral body develops during the Sun phase. The etheric body develops during the Moon phase, and then you've got the Earth phase with its eventual development of the human ego. So he sort of connected these 4 stages to the 4 subtle bodies, or the 4 components of the subtle body. So I'm just wondering how does all of that, when you got to the other side, Herr Steiner, how did all of that strike you? Did it strike you as truthful, or were you off the mark, or?
what he's telling me is pure, it's genius.
Well, he's just saying he's a genius?
No, I feel that the way he's
No, I mean, that's evident. I mean, we all know that. No, I'm just making a joke.
No, he is really a genius. He's actually explaining to me what that all means. And I agree with him.
Mm.
It's so correct. So let me try to explain what he's saying. It will be difficult, but so these planets, or these huge astral bodies, like the Saturn, the Sun, the Moon, and the Earth, they have their personality or a quality, let's say. Okay. If you have read about the qualities of Saturn, Sun, Moon, then you will know that the quality of Saturn is Saturn is a difficult planet. Okay, so it can create very strict boundaries for a person who's ruled by Saturn. Okay, let's say if you are a Capri, you're ruled by Saturn, then you set very strict boundaries for yourself. You value discipline. You value, certain things in your life, and you're judgmental towards yourself, and you want to do everything right. So it's a very difficult planet if you're ruled by Saturn. Okay, so and it's also a planet of material element, which means it's about physical. It's about a material and physical gains. Saturn planet. So it had to start with Saturn energetically, in the sense the Saturn represents the start of physicality.
Gotcha.
The Saturn represents the desire to have a physical experience of the consciousness of the ego.
Uh-huh.
So that's what is the Saturn phase. So that was the energy in the cosmos, let's say, when it all began for him.
I see. All right, this is making sense. Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's the Saturn age.
Right.
So it all began with the desire for the physical manifestation of the consciousness, and it all began with judgment. If there is no judgment, if there is unconditional love and compassion, then there is no need for physical. we come to physical because we have this karma, this judgment of ourselves, of everything, of just judgment and desire. So these together makes the physical experience of the consciousness. When the consciousness is in its purest form, it's it's compassionate, it's selfless love, unconditional selfless love, then there is no need for physical. So it has to start with Saturn, because that's the Saturn's energy, and he understood that he could see the energy of that planet, that astral body, which is Saturn, and that's why it all started with Saturn for him. The next comes the Sun. Now, that's the consciousness's judgment and the desire for physical. The Sun is when everything took the physical form and everything started forming. It broke into all these pieces that we see now, that we are also a part of those pieces. We are a part of Earth's energy, and we are individual pieces as well, all of us. And then there are these planets, like other planets in our solar system, and then bodies like the Sun, the comet, the asteroids, the moons of the planets. They all formed, and they all have their personalities. And these personalities are dependent on the Sun somehow. They are dependent on I don't know how they are affected by Sun in the way, so how far they are from the Sun, and what sort of effect the Sun has on these planets. So Mercury is closest to the Sun, so one side I think is really hot, the other one is really cold, so depending on their position and everything else around it, each of these little planets have their own personality. And that is because of the distance from the Sun, and because of how the Sun affects these other bodies, they have a personality of their own. Some might be too fiery, some might be too cool, and that can be mapped onto the astral body. Astral body has a personality. Some might be happy souls, some might be just grumpy souls. Some might be gregarious, some might be social, some might be introverts. So after the physical and after the formation of the physical bodies, each of these physical bodies was affected by the Sun and had a sort of personality of its own. So that's the second phase. So the physical is formed, and the personality of these bodies are formed, and then comes the Moon. So Moon represents emotions. Moon represents which was the other body? The etheric body, to do with emotions.
Etheric body is yeah.
To do with emotions. Then came the emotional phase, where the Saturn phase started to melt down into becoming more softer, more accepting, more compassionate. So where the emotions started taking over so the positivity came over the negativity, let's say. You can imagine Saturn and Moon to be the opposite.
Right.
So then comes back from that judgment and from that desire, we go back to becoming more compassionate, we go back to becoming more emotionally guided, we go back to becoming more just emotionally more aware, and more loving, selfless, unconditional love, that sort of thing. And then comes the human ego, where all of these things combine and work together. I'm really interested to know what are the other three phases that he
doesn't say much about them. They just correspond to, I think, Vulcan and Jupiter and one other that I've forgotten. But I don't remember him characterizing them very much.
So that's how he explains it. It's how the energy was. The energy was from Saturn, then it went to Sun, then it went to Moon. Yeah. Now it's come to the human evolved consciousness, and all the three things combined together now.
Yeah, that's cool. I like that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense out of his model. Okay. Was there a point where the moon that we have actually was two separate moons that got fused together? Like some scientists are now thinking that it was two separate moons?
Two moons, yes.
Ah,
Uh, Fused together, no. One moon dispersed, vanished. Probably through impact on our own moon, the moon that we see now. It sort of vanished.
Gotcha.
Into pieces, is what I'm being shown.
Okay. I'm curious about the degree to which these cosmic beings that you talk about interfere in the events of the Earth. Like, for instance, the comet that wiped out the dinosaurs, was that any kind of a divine intervention there, or was it a pure accident?
Wow, what an interesting question. It's not a straight answer I'm giving. So was it done by intentionally done, or was it?
Yeah.
He's saying it had to be done. I don't know what it means. Does it mean that it was done on purpose? He's not giving me a yes to done on purpose, but he's saying it had to be done for the next phase of life to begin. It's almost like the dinosaurs were like there to make the environment ready for the human form to come in.
Were we incarnating as dinosaurs? I mean, was it basically us?
Yes, it was a part of us, but it he's saying that had to come, the dinosaur had to come and go for the human, because for us to be able to survive here in the human form.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the dinosaur was also us. We are the same energy, which is going back and forth.
Okay. So we've been reincarnating all along on this planet in different animal forms.
Yes and no, because even souls that have not incarnated as animals before, as dinosaur or animals, have incarnated in the human form on Earth. They might be beings from other planets as well that have incarnated on Earth. And there were also some beings which were dinosaurs also.
Is incarnation voluntary, or is it strictly karmic? And I ask this because it's not immediately evident to me why someone would incarnate as a bug, for instance. I mean, why incarnate as an ant or a cockroach? Or, I mean, what's the pull there? You know,
While you were talking, I was getting so much information from it, and then suddenly it went blank. So, okay. Incarnation is he's talking about, he explained about this in his research. Did he talk about incarnation in his research?
Yeah, quite a bit.
So he's saying, as explained in his work, it's a combination of volunteering and karmic. So it's not purely karmic, it's not purely voluntary, it's a combination of it. Karma playing a lot of the karma has a big role in it, of course, because the karma decides the openings for you. So what is there available for you to choose is dependent on your karma. So imagine you are walking on this path, and which is decided by your karma, so depending on what you do, where you go next, you get to see few other paths. Then you take wherever you go next, you get to see few other paths. So wherever you choose to go, the paths open for you, new paths open for you. So that's your karma. Wherever you choose to go is your karma. So that is whatever you choose to act, think, behave, represent your being, in the sense your choices creates your karma.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on the karma, the new paths open. And if your karma has led to an opening for a life of either a bug, either a cockroach or a fly or a chicken or a human, then it's your choice. You can volunteer, okay, I'm going to be a chicken or a bug. So it's like your karma will take you to a path of openings. So these are the options available for you. Now you can choose amongst these options what you want, but these are the only options available for you because this is the path you chose.
Mm-hmm. I see. Okay. In your cosmology, you stated that the incarnation of Jesus Christ was like the main event for you in human history. And you saw it as one of the beings from the sun, one of the powers, coming down and taking on human form, and that when Christ was crucified, his blood actually entered into the earth and changed the vibratory structure of the earth so that it resonated differently after his death. Does that all turn out to be true? I know how important the Christ event was for you.
It is true, isn't it? It's so interesting the way he explains stuff. Oh my God. So interesting. Anyway, what he's showing me is that everything is like a metaphor or a what do you call it? A euphemism? Where you say one thing but you mean the other.
Yeah, metaphor.
Symbolic, yeah, metaphor.
Right.
So it's like that for him. The incarnation of Christ, of course, he was a very high vibrational being and very, very important purpose on earth, and a chosen purpose on earth. And whatever happened with him, the pain, the suffering that he endured, and still could be so so loving, so compassionate, so giving, and so forgiving. He had that that following. He had that admiration. He had those followers, who loved him, who respected him. Who could see the qualities in him that were all high vibrational, and that felt good, that resonated with them, and sort of gotten them attracted to him. And through his suffering, which he would say as his blood going on earth. Now, going on earth means on everything else, on the beings on earth. His suffering was like eye-opening thing, or a new perspective people gained, and through that, and then they changed. They became sort of high vibration. Their vibration changed. The people's everyone else who was following him, their vibration changed. And then that's how the earth's vibration changed, you can say, because through his suffering he could change people. He could people loved him so much, and I don't know the entire story, but that's what he's saying, that through his suffering, which is the bleeding of the blood, people changed. They became higher vibrations. They became more loving, accepting. Everything good that he represented, and he wanted his teachings, whatever his teachings represented, and people embodied them. When they saw him suffer, it just increased even more because they felt more strongly for him after that. So that's how he affected the vibration on earth by changing his followers, by changing the vibration of his followers and making them more loving and compassionate.
Okay. All right, that makes sense. You talked a lot about how you could see into the past lives of a lot of, like in one of the last great lecture cycles you gave was karmic relationships, where you were talking about the past lives of a lot of these Western thinkers. And you said that Francis Bacon was the reincarnation of the Arab ruler Harun al-Rashid, and that Charles Darwin was the reincarnation of the Arab Jabir who led the assault into Spain, from North Africa into Spain. Does that turn out to be true? Were those correct readings of those men's past lives?
He's saying yes, and he's very happy about it. Yeah, he's saying yes.
And he's happy about it. Why?
Because he was able to predict it properly.
Oh, he's happy that he was right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I see. But the way you characterized it was that it was another way for the Arabs to get into the West. Since they couldn't get in physically, they got in metaphysically through reincarnating as Western scientists, and thereby injecting a strain of materialism into the West. It sounds a little anti-Semitic. It sounds a little bit like you're associating Islam with materialism. And so I'm wondering if there was anything anti-Semitic about it, or it's just a matter you were just reporting the news of the Akashic record as you were reading it, and that's just the way it was. So I'm wondering
I don't think he believes it's anti-Semitic.
Okay.
There's no judgment attached to with being materialistic.
Right.
He doesn't see it as a bad thing.
Right.
It is what it is. It's playing its role. It is very important. It's as important as all the other religions. More so, if according to him. So, there's no judgment attached to it. Being material, he just looks at it as a form of energy, as just what it is. It is what it is. As that's the truth. That's the reality. That's the energy Islam brought or brings. In some way or form. It also brings non-material energy in some forms, and it brings that energy in other forms. So, he could energetically see it, and that's why he could predict. And he's right. He believes.
Herr Steiner, were you also right about you said that John the Baptist was reincarnated as the great Italian Renaissance painter Raphael? And then that individual then was later reincarnated as the German poet Novalis. Was that true? Was that correct?
Can you tell me again the incarnations, please?
He said that John the Baptist reincarnated as Raphael, from the time of Leonardo and Michelangelo. And then that individual then reincarnated as Novalis, the German poet from around the year 1800 or so. Was that true? Is that a fact?
Yes, and he's also talking about after that, fourth one. This is so interesting.
Who was he after Novalis? Was there another one after that?
Which year was Novalis?
Around 1800.
he is talking about the next incarnation. Was he a lady or? He was a lady in the incarnation after Novalis.
Okay.
In the and he was into this mediumship and spiritual stuff, and he was to do with that. He's showing me Dolores Cannon. I don't know if that's literally her he's talking about, or he just he's showing a lady who's into the spiritual stuff after that.
Okay. There are speculations that you died of an intestinal illness that took about 6 months, and there are speculations that you were poisoned. Was that correct? Were you poisoned?
Oh my God. Okay. I don't think he was poisoned.
No.
No, I don't think he was poisoned. He's talking about it was his eating habits and stuff.
Oh, okay. I see. The great building that you built to house anthroposophy, you called the Goetheanum. But the first version of it was burned down, I think, in 1921, just a few years before your death. There are speculations that it was burned down by the Nazis. Was it the Nazis who burned it down?
Yes.
Oh, it was. Aha. Solve that mystery, huh? Okay.
Has some explanation to give, but
what? No. Can you clarify, Herr Steiner? What was it in particular that the Nazis had against you? What didn't they like?
Yeah, I was getting into that anyway. You were on the same.
Right.
It was the opposite of what he was. So it's almost like the Nazi and this Herr Steiner represented the two opposite ends of a pole. So let's say if they are completely in the material realm or materialistic, then he was very spiritualistic, and he was doing very well, let's say, or very important and very solid work, and they didn't like that, so almost out of fear of some sorts.
I see.
Of his work.
Yeah.
Of his.
You also said that there was a war in heaven in the 19th century involving the Archangel Michael, and that certain spirits were cast out and wound up on the physical plane, and they poisoned men's minds, and that this led into World War I. Is that correct?
Sorry, a lot of thoughts coming in my mind and a lot of pictures. Just trying to make sense of it all and understand it. war in heaven. He's talking about a sort of a disagreement. He wouldn't call it a war. Disagreement between the forces that are, let's say, the law keepers of the galactic system. So he's talking about the disagreement. So the vibration on Earth has to be shifted. Okay, it has shifted now recently. We're going into the new Earth. It was about how to start the process, or how to initiate that process of shifting the vibration on Earth, making it a more higher vibrational place. It was about that, and among these beings, the galactic, let's call them law keepers, for the lack of language and words, there were sort of options of how things could go, and not everyone agreed on having a war for that. So the war, I think we spoke about this in earlier interviews as well, where Hitler, and why was that needed? It was needed for the dual aspect, for the duality. So when we see the darkness, we choose light. So we see light, we appreciate light, and we choose light. So it was World War is for that same reason. The duality shows us what we don't want, and then it makes us choose what we do want. So there was a sort of a disagreement on how this could take place.
Okay. And you also said that in a certain sense, the Archangel Michael descended into the earth at about that time, around 1879, and that this began what you called the age of the Archangel Michael. So is that the age that we're in now? Is Michael present somehow on this planet? That's so interesting. He talks about there isn't just one incarnation of him. He talks about he has incarnated in many, many, many forms, not just one incarnation, because he has such a massive amount of energy, and he is, he's just a very huge energy, and he has incarnated in many forms, not just one. Mm-hmm. Okay.
He's taken lots of shapes and forms, including non-human.
So these angels are real beings that we refer to as Michael and Raphael and Gabriel. Those all really exist.
Yes.
And they have the correct attributes that we assign to them. Michael is warlike, and Gabriel is associated with communication. That's all correct?
So let's say there's a being, he's saying, okay, there's this high vibrational, angelic, high energy, very pure being. And this being with some sort of personality and energy is compassionate about, or is passionate about, communication and the way we communicate, and likes to help us with communication with the nature, with ourselves, with each other. He doesn't have a name. He's just a being. Doesn't have a sex. He doesn't have a name. It's us. We have that language. Right. We have to label it. Mm-hmm. It's our label. Mm-hmm. So if you call it Archangel Raphael, other people on other planet might call it something else. So it's what we recognize that being as. It's our label. So there is a being like that, yes, who's compassionate about communication. We named it Raphael. That's how he explains it.
Right. Gabriel for communication.
Yes,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
okay. Yeah. I see. Gotcha. All right. That all makes sense. What was one of your favorite past lives, Herr Steiner?
Past life, past life. Ooh, I bet he must have spoken about his own past life, didn't he? In his
Not that I
recent.
recall, actually. Not that I recall.
Hmm, okay, okay. What is his past life? He would like to share a non-physical past life. Is that okay?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He shares with me a life in which he is in a spiritual form and he is working very closely with people on earth, and he is in the form of a little 7 to 8 year old girl, and he shows me a girl that's in a spirit form and that's working with a lot of people on earth, and he has had experience with so many different things, so many, and he's worked with people in all the fields, everything you can imagine at that time. and and then he chose to come back in a human form and do it all again. So he went into all these other different things as well. Because he worked on many aspects of life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been influenced by his life as that little girl who was a spiritual guide to many others.
Mm-hmm. There's a guy I remember, Ian Stevenson, who did research on birthmarks, and he correlated birthmarks. He said that birthmarks are like scars of past life injuries.
Yeah.
Is that true? Was he correct?
So very much so, very much.
Yeah. So that's true. Okay. Have you started planning your next life, Herr Steiner?
He's talking about he already is having an incarnation now on Earth, and he's into spiritual work, as you can imagine, some sort of spiritual work, and he's just concentrating on that one at the moment.
I see. Okay. All right. I guess those are all the questions I had for you today, Herr Steiner. That was amazing. Thank you for being gracious enough to talk to us. That was great.
He's saying thank you. I really enjoyed this form of communication.
And we did as well. Likewise. Thank you. That was fantastic. Okay.